All right, students, welcome back. I hope you guys are hanging in there. We're very excited. It's the first time that we've done this type of live discussion before. So we're very excited to offer these college admissions discussion, this advice. Hopefully you guys are ready to go. This is something that we haven't done before. But in just a second, I'll introduce our special guest for the evening, for the afternoon, wherever you guys are in the world. Jodi, Gershoni from College Unlimited is here. We're going to go through just some thoughts on post-COVID college admissions. I'm sure a lot of you guys are stressed. I'm sure a lot of you guys are anxious through all this. It's to be expected, right? I don't think that anybody thinks that you guys shouldn't be at this time. But just like we do for the live streams, for the test prep, right, for SAT, ACT, we're going to be here to answer your questions. Jodi and I have a pretty good game plan for what we want you guys to see, what we want you guys to talk about. Or think about, I guess, as you start this process over the next 6 months if you're a junior, or over the next 18 months if you're a sophomore. And if you're even younger than that, then I really appreciate you logging on because that takes some serious work ethic that I certainly didn't have. But again, guys, the most important thing that we can think about and go through in this process is to make sure that you guys feel, empowered by the situation, not feeling overwhelmed. We talked about this a lot in the test prep stuff, right? SAT, ACT. The only advantage that I had in terms of testing was that I didn't think about the next day, let alone where I was going to college. This was just not something on my mind. Maybe my parents pushed me, right? But internally, I really didn't care. I didn't have the right mindset, I think, to put in the time, put in the effort, to be organized. And you guys will find that as we go through this process, that's going to be half the battle. Is just staying organized, figuring out certain things that appeal to you about a college, and then making sure that you find those things in colleges. And the best part is guys, I've said it before on our SAT, ACT stuff, but I don't really feel bad anymore because we're offering all of these free resources. If students don't take advantage of it, then it's just like I was when I was a kid. I'm sure, to be honest, that these free resources were offered to me when I was a kid, but it was just whatever. It was to do the bare minimum so I didn't get grounded, so that I could I could go hang out with my friends on the weekend. That is not a good way to approach high school life. Okay, be a 16-year-old, be a 17-year-old, but do the things that you need to do so that you can actually enjoy doing something on a Friday night rather than just dreading that moment you get home to your parents and they just start yelling at you because you didn't do anything that you were supposed to do that day. Okay, so can everybody give me a thumbs up in the chat if you guys feel like that's maybe you, or two thumbs up if you guys feel like that's you. And then just say hello if you guys are logging on for the first time. Welcome. Again, we're going to go through this. I'm going to bring Jodi on here in just a second, and we're just going to go through a presentation. But at any time during the presentation, you guys feel like you have questions for Jodi or me, you can certainly ask those. We're going to talk a little bit about how test optional schools work, what that really means. We have some pretty good insight from this year. This is the first time that every school has been test optional. And from there, guys, we'll answer any questions you guys have along the way. And hopefully make this college process a little bit more doable more than anything, right? It's there's a lot going on in your lives. We want you guys to be 16, 17-year-olds first and foremost. You just got a car. That's going to be infinitely more fun than talking about ACT and SAT prep. That much I can guarantee. But again, if you guys are working through this stuff, it's you guys, again, if you stay organized, you're working through it. You can enjoy the things about being a 16 and 17-year-old. It doesn't have to be this overwhelming feeling. And you'll be good to go. Dylan, Melissa, welcome. Lucy, welcome. Hi, guys. Absolutely. Yeah, we're super pumped to do this, guys. I'm super excited. This is obviously the first time that we've had some college admissions discussion on the channel. It's a first for me as well. So I'm interested to hear Jodi's take on a lot of this stuff. I certainly can offer some insight and opinion on the testing aspect of this, but then it's up to you guys to knock it out of the park, and I know you guys will. And it's just about taking advantage of this stuff. So again, guys, if this is the first time you've logged on, if you subscribe to the channel, you should see a chat feature. And just bear with me for a second, guys. For those that have already commented, Melissa, Lucy, Dylan, thank you. But if you've already logged, if you've never been with us before for this type of live stream, if in the top right-hand corner you don't see something that says like chat, right, or open the chat, then you should see that. You should have to subscribe to the channel. You might have to refresh the page from there. And then again, there should be a chat feature that drops down. Please make sure that you guys say hello if you feel comfortable doing that. or give us a thumbs up to know that you can hear us or hear me talking for right now and Jody here in a second. But I just want to make sure that you guys have the opportunity to to hear us out and ask any questions. And that's where that chat feature will really come in. So I'll give everybody, Victoria, welcome. Welcome. Jody, I know you're listening, so just hang tight for a second. We'll bring you on here in just a minute. Amy, Jack, Jonathan, welcome. Jonathan, I think I saw your nice comment on one of our previous YouTube videos recently. Thank you for that. It really inspires us to want to make more of these things. If you guys are going to work hard, we're going to work hard for you, right? That's the bottom line. We just have to make sure that you guys are willing to put in the effort. When we see comments like that, when we know you guys are here ready to go on a Wednesday in the middle of March, and you know you don't have to apply for a while, okay? You guys are going to, we know that you're serious about this, and we're going to be serious as well. If you hear my dog barking in the background, I apologize. We might have to let him into the room here in a second. He might join the live stream. First time ever on camera. Hey guys, Jay, Lily, welcome. Amy, Jonathan, welcome guys. All right, guys, so without further ado here, I'm going to bring Jody on. Let me see. Let's see if I can do this. Let's see if my tech savviness. And then I'll bring her on. Okay, guys, so without further ado, Jody Gershoni from College Unlimited is here with us tonight. Let's see. Hi, Jody. Can you hear us? Let me unmute, hopefully unmute Jody. Jody, can you hear us now? Jody, you might have to unmute yourself if you can. Sorry. Should find it on the screen. I think I muted Jody and then now she's unable to unmute. There we go. Can you hear us? There we go. Jody's back on. We knew that there was going to be a little technical difficulty here, guys. So, guys, again, welcome to Jody from College Unlimited. She's here. I've known Jody for a long, long time. I've actually worked with both of her daughters and maybe her third daughter. We'll see how it goes this year. But Jody's been I think a great resource for just for students looking not only to apply to college. And I think one of the things you guys are going to see from her presentation today is, and us working through this and answering your questions, is that this does not have to be a daunting process. One of the things that I really believe in this college situation is that you don't have to make it the end of the world. It doesn't have to be this end-all, be-all. You can be a 16-year-old kid. You can be organized, right, and disciplined, as I was not when I was your age, yet still be, still be able to have some fun. And that's the most important thing. And I can tell you from personal experience that not doing your work, right, not putting things together, being kind of last in line for everything is not a good way to succeed. When you're 23 years old, and Jody will talk about this tonight, and you realize that other people have been working really hard since they were 16 or 17 years old, you have to play there's a big catch-up game involved in that, and that stinks. And you don't want to be that person, trust me. If you don't believe me right now, you're going to find that out in 6 years, and you'll be like, man, I should have listened to that guy on YouTube. But again, it's really important that you guys take that into account and that you guys work that into your lives, and I think Jody can help with that and talk you guys through some of this organizational stuff. So without further ado, Jody, do you want to just give us a quick rundown on, I guess, what you're seeing just in terms of the college admissions and how it's changed? I guess we'll start with that, and then we'll get into the presentation and just answer any questions you guys have as we go. But Jody, just maybe give us a little rundown on what you're seeing from the post-COVID admissions cycle.
Okay, thank you, Chase, for inviting me to your YouTube. I am a first-timer YouTuber right now.
She's going to be an influencer soon enough.
Yeah, Chase doesn't listen to anything, and maybe he was a screw-up when he was a kid, but I wasn't. So together we're a good team, but the other good part of the team is he knows technology, and I don't. So if there's any tech glitches, we can ask Chase.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, before I kind of dive into the whole idea of college admissions today and kind of what we've learned with the 2021 graduation cycle, just a little bit about myself. So I'm what you call an independent educational consultant. and that is a very fancy way of saying college counselor. So I'm not very fancy, but I do spend all my time, literally most of my time, meeting with colleges, understanding admissions, understanding trends. This year, with quarantine and the pandemic, I would say that, colleges presented to us, multiple times a week. So I've kind of stayed very, very up to date on the trends and the actualities of what happened in college admissions this year.
And Jody, and Jody, just on another note, guys, I didn't know this until today, but Jody just let me know also that she is on an independent panel with a number of different colleges, right, to figure out one of the aspects that we'll talk about tonight in terms of college applications. But just to give you guys some perspective, Jody is on an independent panel working with colleges, so it's not like she's very much in it. We'll just leave it at that. She's very much involved with colleges and the admissions process, and I just thought that was cool that you mentioned that today before we got on this live stream. So wanted to include that. And by the way, Isabella, welcome to the live stream. We're just Isabella, if you've just tuned in, we are just starting the presentation with regards to the college admissions cycle. So hang tight for a second. If you have any questions, Isabella, as this is the case for everybody, please don't hesitate to ask those in the chat. So sorry, Jody, keep going.
So now I know why my daughter's sessions are so long.
Yapping.
Just kidding. Okay. Besides being a college counselor, more importantly, I'm a mom of 3 girls, as Chase mentioned. So I just went through this process with my oldest daughter, who is now a freshman at the University of Georgia, go Dog. And the middle daughter is currently taking Chase's classes and preparing for the SAT in 3 days.
Yep.
And then my baby is now in 8th grade and will probably be working with Chase. But
we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes with the middle student.
That I come at this not just as a college counselor, but as a mom and someone that's been through it. So I'm here to answer your questions. So I just want to say 3 things about my goal tonight on this chat or this conversation. One is to share what I've learned. So if you guys have any questions, like you said, feel free to ask. And I will be as open and honest as I can and give you as much as I can. Number 2, like I said, clear up any kind of confusion you have. So, you may, on certain aspects of the admissions process, there might be, some confusion in your mind. Just ask. And then lastly, and most importantly, and my students will attest to this, to me, this is an exciting time of your life. It might sound scary. It might sound daunting. Your friend's neighbor's cousin that talks about everything you have to do. I want you to put all that aside and just make it your journey. And my goal and Chase's goal is to help you make it exciting. We want you at the end of the day to feel really good about yourself the first day you walk on that campus. Because if you do feel good about yourself, you're going to take those risks and ultimately become a successful adult. And so, if anything today, I'd like to help you make this process exciting, less scary, and just kind of more of a fun journey. So, Chase, you asked me a little bit about changes in college admissions throughout this pandemic and, just being in 2021 as a whole. All right, so as far as the pandemic goes, the most important thing I'd like to get across here, and this goes from every college that I've met with in the past 12 months now, but everybody has been hit by the pandemic. There's not a soul on this earth that has not been hit by the pandemic, including admissions staff, deans of admissions. Okay, so they completely understand what you've gone through, and they've completely had to work their ways or create kind of new systems or adapt to new things based on the pandemic, just like you did in school. And so you have to trust the fact that when they're evaluating your application, they're going into it knowing that it doesn't look exactly like it did 2 years ago. Okay, so that's the first thing that you have to understand when you are going through the application process in a year or two. Second thing is because of that, it has become way more of a human process. So they meaning college admissions folks, are evaluating humans. They're humans evaluating humans. So they want you, as best as you can, to communicate who you are.
Very important point there. Yeah, very, very important point. What Jodi just said, guys, is so important on the uniqueness aspect, and to what she said earlier, just regarding that this is not a formulaic thing. It's humans, and humans are evaluating this, and usually the humans are alumni of that school. So if you're looking to apply to Northwestern, right, as an example, Northwestern's admissions department has a lot of Northwestern alumni within the admissions department, and they want you to reflect well on their school. It's not just some formula, as Jodi alluded to. It's and she'll get into that in more detail, but couldn't agree more with that point.
Okay. Do you want to show the slide?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll pull up the slide. So, guys, this is a presentation. If anybody has any questions about this, the same presentation that's going to be in the background of the screen here in just a second can also be found as a viewable link within the description below this video. So if you guys want to follow along, you can follow along on the screen. Obviously, if you want to print this out at a later time and rewatch this, the recording is going to be posted on the YouTube channel as soon as the live stream is over. But again, if you guys want to follow along with this and view it as we go through it, you can do that either on the screen or you can do it at your own pace by clicking on the link in the description. So I'll just put that on the screen here just 1 second here, please. Let's see. Okay, can everybody see this? All right, cool. So guys, again, if you guys want to follow along, please feel free to do so by clicking that link. There should be a viewable link down there. And then Jodi, whenever you want to get going.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Chase.
Yep.
So this slide in particular, I created it because it's a perfect visual for kind of how you're being evaluated. I get questions all the time. I was in lockdown, so how am I supposed to show leadership? How am I supposed to, build that resume that everybody's been talking about for so many years? Or, hey, my school completely went online when my friend's school in Texas is hybrid or was fully in person. So how is that fair? How does an admissions staff make that fair when they're evaluating students? So this slide kind of shows what I want to get my point across here. You don't need to worry about that because every student is evaluated under the umbrella of his or her high school. So most admissions offices are divided regionally for that reason. They need regional reps to understand the high schools, the offerings, the rigor, the pandemic issues of the particular region. So when you submit your application, first and foremost, they're going to say, where is this student from? And then they will start evaluating because that admissions person that was in charge of that region knows, hey, this region was totally on lockdown, or, most kids weren't able to do activities. They know that. So you have to just trust the fact that it is a fair process. And they've kind of figured out those nuances of how to evaluate. And then
Jodi, on that note, just as both a mom, because you, like Jodi said, she's had a daughter that's gone through this process, and fortunately, unfortunately for you, Jodi, as a mom and knowing so much about this, it's got to be pretty stressful for you. I mean, you know, as much as these students are seeing this, can you talk a little bit about how you personally, both again as a mom more than anything, reduce that stress and trust the fact that you really believe that and because I think that's a huge bonus that you can both make that statement from college, having all of this success and knowledge about college counseling, but also with regards to just being a mom of two students that are recently going through this process.
So that's a good point, and I will definitely address that. So essentially, as a mom and as a college counselor, I advise students and my own daughters to just be themselves. So whoever you are, whatever you like, whatever activity you're into, whatever talent you have, just focus on that. Be more of you. Go deeper into whoever you are. So, some students or my own kids say, well, how do you do that? So maybe I have a soccer playing student, who was shut down during the pandemic. So she loves soccer. So maybe she spends her time teaching soccer to the neighborhood kids, or, developing some kind of online program or whatever to, keep kids active while they were quarantined. So the only reason I brought that example up is because I'm not looking for students to kind of build their resume by throwing everything on it and seeing what sticks. It's more of take who you are and dive in deeper, become even more of who you are. And that's actually, the pandemic obviously had a lot of negative, but there was a lot of opportunity. Here we are in this college admissions that's been stagnant for decades upon decades. And so it now is catapulted into forcing admissions staff to kind of reevaluate the way that they look at students. And this brings in our next point, which I'd like to talk about, which is character. So thank you, Chase.
Yep, no problem.
So essentially, if there's one takeaway this cycle, it's that character is the new key to admission. And like Chase said, there's an actual organization that's been developed based on research, and it was actually created. It's a collaborative group, and in this collaborative group, there's deans of admissions, there's college counselors, there's high school counselors, there's teachers, there's all these people that are trying to bring character traits into the admissions process in a more evaluative way. So they're actually coming up with ways to quantify character traits. How they're going to do this, I'm not exactly sure yet. But the reason I wanted to bring this up is because having the opportunity, or having like all of a sudden all this time on your hands during the pandemic or the quarantine, what colleges are going to be looking for is how did the student choose to spend their time? What types of things did they do? Did they, maybe they haven't, they've been scheduled their whole lives and now they have all this time on their hands. How did they choose to, maybe they went out and developed stronger relationships with their cousins, or, developed a nonprofit just because they've never done it before and they thought that would be really cool. It's those types of character traits. Who are you as a person? Because ultimately, colleges want to know who you're going to be on their campus.
Yep.
And so that's kind of. I just wanted to.
It's a great point, guys. And for everybody that's been on this channel before, one of the things that you guys know that I talk about constantly in these test prep live streams and these videos is how important what Jodi just talked about, how important that is from a characters defined. I had this basketball coach one time, horrible basketball coach, but incredible at at giving us quotes, at inspirational quotes. We were like 2 in a million, but he was an incredible quote maker, quote giver. And one of the things he said, right, his character is built when nobody's watching. That's really cliche, but it's so true. Because, again, for anybody that's watching this, especially for anybody that's independently watching this, that didn't, that's been on the YouTube live streams before and has listened to me talk, I can't begin to describe how impressive that is. I already told you guys that when I was your age, it was, and this wasn't, that long ago, though I'm getting older, I can't believe it, right? But not that long ago, I didn't have any of the obstacles in terms of distractions that you guys have now, right? Honestly, if Netflix was around when I was 18 years old, it would have been like next, right? There would have been no work done. There was already so little work done, but at least something got done. Netflix, all the stuff that you guys have at your disposal is incredible. And the fact that you guys are here and not distracted, or at least trying to pay attention to what we're talking about today is just so critical. And that goes into the character aspect. If you haven't done something, if you feel like, oh man, I'm kind of lacking, I wish I would have done more during the COVID situation, go do it now, right? It doesn't have to be it's the end of the world now because, I didn't do it. Start somewhere, right? Because if you get this is actually a football coach, but he used to say that if you get better this much each day, right, kind of building, if you get better this much each day, by the end of a month, right, it's going to be amazing how much you know. And that's the same thing that Jodi was just talking about, is the character comes in so many different ways, work ethic being a huge one. And that's very, we'll see how they come out with that, but that is in ways quantifiable. You can see somebody who's working really hard based on them having a job while also maintaining great grades, while also maintaining, captain the sports team. That's a lot of time and effort and commitment, and colleges will recognize that. So don't think that you haven't done enough. Don't think that it's too late. I'm over it. Right? Do everything you can, because it is what it is right now. And in my life when I was your age, there's no question that I would have been like, Joe. I would have listened to what Jody just said and been like, well, that's it. Right? There's nothing else I can do. And I would have just gone and laid on the couch and watched more Netflix or whatever. Right? That doesn't have to be you. You can listen to me now, or it can go in one ear out the other. And I'm sure for some of you guys it will be like, oh, whatever. What is he talking about? Just get me done with this. My mom just made me watch this, and I don't know why. Right? But for some of you, it's gonna resonate with you. And rather than doing what I did and waiting till I was 22, 23, and now having to play catch up, working way harder than I should have had to be, right? I could have been doing that at 16, 17 years old and still having fun by just managing and organizing my time. And it's just so critical that aspect of that character that Jody just mentioned. So I just wanted to add that as kind of a personal caveat for anybody that's watched the channel before. Because I know that I think that's resonated with students, and I think it will continue to resonate because you guys are doing a great job working hard. So just wanted to add that. Sorry, Jody.
No, that's a very good point. And for any parents or adults that are on here, it's important to know what we're talking about here, because when we were younger, when I was going through college admissions, which is way older than Chase, but it was all about being a well-rounded student. Like it was too much. You need to be a well-rounded student. You need to be a well-rounded student. In today's world of college admissions, it's about having a well-rounded freshman class, which means, like Chase said, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't spend your time doing things that you don't like or that you're not into. Go deeper in the things that you are into. So I just kind of wanted to leave that there, if that's okay.
Yeah, and guys, just as we finish up that, because it's such an important point, can everybody give me 2 thumbs up in the chat to let us know that all makes sense in terms of character, not reinventing the wheel, and just being true to yourself, right? Jody, as you were saying that, my dad had this a buddy who put on a resume right out of college that he was a communication distribution engineer. That's what he put. I actually put this on his work resume to try to apply to other jobs, and he was a mailman. And he tried to reclassify that rather than just and tried to make this big thing. He didn't get the job, and the reason that I bring that up is because no matter what work experience you've had, no matter what schooling you've had, make sure that you continue to be true to yourself, right? And just put it what it is, and then morph that to really define you. And if you feel like you haven't done enough right now, there's still time. You still have 6 months before you have to, before you have to get to that point. So make sure that you're putting in the time and the effort now. And again, guys, if I see a couple thumbs up here coming in, double thanks, Melissa, Dylan, Amy subbing in for Henry, Isabella. That's great, guys. I really appreciate the interaction there. Again, if you guys have any questions while we're going through this, don't hesitate to let us know on the chat. I can see those come through, and I'm happy to ask Jody those questions if it relates to college. And then Dylan, like I said earlier, I typed this in, but if you saw that, we'll get into the part about the SAT scoring and what all that test optional stuff means here in a second. So, cool, guys.
Okay. Chase, will you go to the 2021 slide, please?
Yes, I certainly can.
2 slides down.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I think we nailed the part about building self, so I'm going to move on because I think this is kind of why these guys are here today.
Yep.
So this is overall kind of high level what I learned during the 2021 admission cycle. And these bullets are kind of my takeaways that if you can focus on it, you're going to do just fine. So the first is finding a good fit school seems to be even more helpful and more important than ever. And I can't stress that enough. So what do I mean by that? I mean that when you are creating your college list, you create that with reason behind it. And how do you do that? You do that by researching schools. And I could seriously do an hour on how to research schools virtually, which I won't go into right now. But let me tell you, there's plenty of ways to research schools virtually. And it starts as simple as emailing, websites, good old-fashioned pick up the phone and call an academic advisor to learn about, a certain program at the school. All of that is on the table. But the reason I stress that this is an important element is because, trust me on this, if you do the research to find schools that you believe are a good fit for you based on whatever criteria is important to you, academic, social, geographic, financial, whatever, okay? You've done all that homework. When you are creating the application for that school, it will come across, and most likely, if they're that good of a fit for you, you're that good of a fit for them.
And
okay?
Jody, on that note, we had a question on that same thing for you. Is demonstrated interest a real thing? So, like you said, being on the mailing list, visiting the school. If you don't have the means to visit a school, making sure that you're reaching out. Do colleges keep track of that stuff, guys? Again, demonstrated interest is just showing interest in the school and making sure that you are again on the mailing list or having visited the school. If you're fortunate enough to be able to travel to a different school, it's obviously harder in COVID. But is that a real thing?
It is a real thing. So some schools will tell you they don't track it, but most schools literally have software that tracks how many times a student hits the school. And what I mean by hit is visit, email, get on a mailing list, visit the college fair when they come to their individual high school. All of that gets tracked onto a software program that most colleges pay for. Why do they do this? Because it's their way of creating a marketing list. So yes, it is tracked. When it becomes important is, and it's a little bit weird with this whole pandemic year, but it's like at the end of the day, if there's 10 students that all look the same, and one student has touched that school 2 or 3 times, the odds of that student saying yes to the school if they get accepted are better than the kid that just gets accepted that has never touched the school. And this is getting kind of in the woods here, but
I think
that's how schools
yeah.
develop their yield numbers, and that's how they get ranked.
Yeah.
So yes, it is a thing.
But it's a great question, Mike. Mike, thanks for the question too, because as Jody just said, again, it goes to everything Jody said, and this is why I thought this presentation on the channel would be such a great thing for students, is because what Jody said originally is this is human to human contact, right? They're reading your essay, they're looking at you as a fit for their school. If you apply to Stanford and Harvard and Yale and you have one safety school and that's the place you go, I've seen it before, but students seem so deterred, right? And like so, it's almost like a body language shift. And colleges don't want that. There's even been a thing that there's been a rumor, I've heard this, Jody, and I don't know if you've heard this as well, to Mike's question about how there'll be like sophisticated rejections of students who a school feels like is applying as a safety, has never visited, has never touched the school, right? Has never entered a mailing list, anything like that, yet is all of a sudden into it, right? They're like, oh, I got to apply to this school, and even if they have incredible grades, incredible statistics that would overshadow maybe that particular school, the school will still reject them because they know kind of what's going on. Have you heard that?
So a good example of that is Tulane University is very much known as a school that is a safety for kids that are applying to either the Ivies or Duke or Vanderbilt, those types of schools. And so if they get a high flyer, someone with really high test scores and GPA, apply, and they've never touched the school, they just assume that it's the safety. And that screws up Tulane's yield numbers if they accept that student. So a lot of times those high flyers get rejected. So just in a nutshell, definitely demonstrate interest to your school.
Yeah.
To your school, list of schools.
It's a great question, though, Mike. Yep. Keep going.
Want me to keep going?
Yep, that's great. Thanks, Mike, too, for the question. Go ahead, sorry, Jody.
The point here is to use all parts of the application. So I don't know if you guys have seen an application yet, depending on what grade you're in, but most schools that you're going to be applying to are on something called the Common Application, which will allow you to apply to multiple schools with one application. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but you get the gist. Okay, there's many different elements of the application, including, activities lists, essays, letters of recommendation. There's an additional information section. There's all sorts of spots on that application to feed your colleges more information about you. So my advice here is don't leave anything blank. Use all of those spaces to continue to highlight your attributes. Because at the end of the day, you're marketing yourself to these colleges, and, don't leave anything hanging there. Just use all parts of the application. So,
Yep.
So I'm gonna keep going.
Yep,
Chase?
keep going. Yep, keep going. I think that's super critical to put your best foot forward. Keep going. Yep, I think it's great.
Okay, so the last two are kind of more objective-based. One, and I know Chase will talk a lot about this, is submission of test scores still can help. So even in a test optional world, or at least, test changing world, having a good test score goes a long way.
Disclaimer, by the way, Jody, this is not an advertisement for Star Tutors and their test prep programs.
It's not. Trust me, I wish it wasn't like this, but you can trust one thing, and I really truly believe this based on the results coming in from the 2021 cycle. If you don't want to submit your test scores, you don't need to. It will not hurt you to leave that blank. So essentially, test scores can help, but they will not hurt you. And so
go ahead. No, I was just going to say, on that note, guys, we did have, so Star Tutors had 3 students in their programs this year. This is not necessarily a testament to how it is every year, but Star Tutors, of the programs of students that we had that applied last year to Stanford, 3 students got in, which is a pretty high yield number for the number of students we have in the programs. And of those 3 at Stanford, because I was a little skeptical on that as well, like, do they really care? Like, this is Stanford, Harvard. Are they really going to care if I don't submit a score? Are they really going to accept me? Of the 3 students that applied, 2 submitted their test score, and 1 did not, and obviously all 3 got in. And I only bring that up as an example because, Stanford is this incredible school, but even at these very, very high levels of academic admissions, they are taking that aspect seriously. So, yeah, sorry to interrupt there, Jody, but just wanted to add that as an anecdote.
So, do you guarantee that my child is...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guarantee that, guys. That's not going to be that may not have been the best, maybe not the best story to bring up. But again, I just wanted to say, because everybody knows Stanford, and it's, it's going to be a good thing. Dylan just asked another good question, Jody. I'm just going to piggyback because it was about the SAT scoring for a very high school. The question was, can a high SAT score help with an average GPA? Yeah, Dylan. So again, this kind of goes back to what Jody was talking about with regards to the application and all parts of the application. You want to put your best foot forward in every way possible. So, again, this is not just regarding the testing. This is regarding everything that you can possibly be doing regarding your GPA. If you feel like it's lower than you want it to be right now, then work really hard this semester to raise it up. This isn't the end of the line. You're going to have this semester, and you're going to have next semester, your senior year fall, to be able to raise your GPA if you feel like it's lower than you want it to be. Test scores, right? You just want to put your best foot forward. Open as many doors as you can, because then you have the ability to run through all of those doors. And so a high SAT score, right? A high GPA, more extracurriculars. Doesn't mean you have to go overboard on it, but certainly you want to just keep putting your best foot forward and working as hard as you can. So, yeah, hopefully that answers the question, Don.
Okay, and then lastly on this list, this is kind of hard to understand, but show anything that's evaluative. So essentially, AP scores and 4s and 5s are pretty much what I would say you should put on an application. Again, AP scores are not used for admission, but if you have strong scores, it's another way to kind of essentially bragging rights, brag to the college. So if you do have that, put them on for sure. And then any kind of award, honors, anything that you've been selected for throughout your high school years, make sure that's listed. Don't leave anything out. I mean, anything. So even if it was like I was the top English student in the fall of 2020, 2020, put that stuff. Don't ever think it's not big enough or you shouldn't, this isn't important enough. Just put it. Let them figure that out. Okay, so anything that's of value to.
Joe, and you have two questions during that. So first question from Melissa. Thanks, Melissa, for the question. The first one is, when do you think the data will be revealed, test scores versus no scores, and will it show on Naviance as a data point? So I think the question is for, Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, but for this year's students, as a larger sample size at a high school, on Naviance, do you think that there'll be some data points that will show how many students got into XYZ school with no score versus a submitted score? So I'll let you answer that one, and then Dylan, we'll get to yours in just a second.
Okay. Hey, Melissa. I know Melissa. Hi, Lucy. Okay, so to answer your question, it's not going to be anytime soon. So I think that, yes, it will be there, but it's crazy right now in college admissions. So I don't know, how many students in the 2021 graduation cycle, but there's been a lot of deferrals and a lot of wait lists, and they did that to buy them, they meaning college admissions offices, to buy them time, to figure out how they're going to evaluate these students. And they're doing that. They're working through the bumps in the road, but the actual data is probably not going to be for a while. It will come out. I just don't know exactly when.
Great.
I hope that answers.
Yeah, Melissa, if you have a follow up to what Jody just said, let us know. And then the second question, if Melissa does have a follow up, in the meantime, from Dylan says, how much do senior year fall grades really matter?
Okay. So they matter if you get deferred to a college. So essentially, if you're going to apply to your list of schools on the early deadlines, so there's a few ways to apply to school. One is early action, which is usually the earliest deadline, and students that it's not binding, so you can apply to that early deadline, and what happens is you essentially hear back from the school earlier than if you applied at the regular deadline. And then, so that's two ways. And then there's a third way, early decision, which is also on the early deadline date, but it's binding. So you're actually making an agreement with the college that if you get in and you've applied early decision, you're going to go there. Okay. So to answer your question, if you're deferred, then your fall of senior year grades do matter a lot. Okay, and so like this year, a lot of the seniors were scrambling because, they were already, it was tough on them. They were, either online or hybrid or whatever. And so if their grades fell a little bit, there was a little bit of panic if they got deferred to their favorite school. But usually grades don't fall that much. So it's really not that big of a deal. But for the most part, if you apply in the early deadlines, you're being evaluated on your GPA at the end of junior year. So all those juniors out there, this is the time to just knock it out.
Yeah. And Dylan, again, it kind of goes back to Jody's original point with all that, just to piggyback on that, of put your best foot forward. It's so critical that if you don't know if you're going to be deferred, right? If you're slacking, you don't know if you're going to be deferred, and then you're scrambling in December trying to get your finals down, whatever. If you just keep pushing forward, like the whole senioritis thing, guys, that's all built up. I can't stress enough. You guys don't know. I mean this in the best way possible, but if you're 16, 17 years old right now, you don't know where you want to go. It's everybody's. If you do a ton of research, that's going to give you the opportunity, right? It's the anxiety and the stress that really everybody else builds up around school. We call it chirping in our programs. Everybody's like, oh, where do you want to go? Oh, you have that score, right? High school kids, there's some competition there, and where are you going? Oh, you're not going to get in there. People can be kind of mean in those situations. And it's the senioritis thing is another example where you are, you're just, students just kind of give into that. And like, I have I'm a second year senior, so that gives me the ability to slack off. That's the type of stuff that I did, and again, I thoroughly regret it looking back now, of thinking that was the best way to approach the world, because it's not. when you have a job, right, and you have to do this stuff for real, and you have a boss, and your life is dependent on this with an income, it's going to be a different story when you don't come in and you're like, oh, no, there's no senioritis as a 25-year-old with a job, okay? And that's very, very important to recognize because, again, don't give in to that. It's so important to continue to put your best foot forward, and it's something that I wish I would have learned. There's plenty of time for fun and graduation parties and doing all that kind of stuff. You're going to get bored of it if you do it too often. So, yeah, just piggybacking on that. Oh, and
all right, so
Jody, we have another question for you. Can I jump in? Can I ask it to you?
Yeah.
Okay, another question. Are colleges looking at your long-term pathway and how everything you've done adds up?
Okay, so Isabella, thank you for that question. Chase, will you go to the next slide?
Yep, absolutely.
Please. Okay, so Isabella, great question. So essentially, even though the world has changed a bit and college admissions, yes, they're really looking deep into the application to see if they can understand the student's character. The fundamentals of college admissions still remains the same. Okay, I do this all the time with my students, and I'm going to do it with you very briefly because it's going to answer Isabella's question. But there are essentially five pillars of college admissions. So one is high school rigor and grades, and like I said in the very beginning of this conversation, you're seen under the umbrella of your high school, so they meaning college admissions knows how many APs are offered, how many honors are offered. And they read your transcript based on what was being offered at your school and how much rigor you decided to take, and then how well you did in it. So Isabella, what you need to know is that it's a trajectory. So wherever you started in 9th grade and wherever you are at the end of your junior year, your goal is to have an upward trajectory, which means they like to see a little bit of rigor added each year. And as you do add that rigor, that you can handle it. So whatever grade you're in, I always say every year kind of challenge yourself on the courses that you do like or that you're kind of good at, and maybe take a break on the ones that you're not so, in love with. So I hope that answers your question. So they are looking at the long-term pathway. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is test scores, and I'm wrote there, and I really mean it, it's when available. So don't fret if you haven't been able to take the exam, because like I said, you will not be hurt if you don't submit a test score. Number 3 pillar is your student resume. Who are you outside of the classroom? This is where your character stands out. Where have you shown leadership? Where have you shown drive? How have you helped in your community? What type of person am I going to be on the campus of individual school? Number 4 are your essays, which are the best way to kind of introduce yourself to the college. I always say to my students, and whether they believe me or not, I say, take away the daunting part of the essay and change that word daunting to opportunity. There's no rules, okay? Yeah, there's a prompt, but realistically, you have to answer the prompt, but for the most part, you can tell whatever story you want. So you choose the story that you are going to show to demonstrate who you are as a person through your essay. And to me, that's a huge opportunity. It's not an English assignment. It's a fun thing. It's how can I be creative to show who I am? And then lastly, our letters of recommendation. So Chase and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I believe, from what I'm seeing, that post-pandemic, those letters of recommendation are going to go a long way. And why is that? Because transcripts look different based on the pandemic. Testing looks different based on the pandemic. So there's less evaluative ways to judge or to, read an application. So if they get a letter from a third party that vouches for a student or kind of helps describe what the student is going to be like on their campus, that letter becomes more important than ever because they have to trust someone else that knows the student really, really well. On one little tangent on that, I always want my juniors to ask 2 academic teachers for letters before the end of their junior year just to get a verbal commitment. But it's okay to talk to those teachers. Say, Mr. Smith, would you write a letter of recommendation for me? It would mean a lot. And get into a conversation with Mr. Smith. Give some anecdotes. Oh, remember in a class when everyone was stuck and I raised my hand and it became like this 1-hour discussion? Those are the types of stories and conversations that will help your teachers, like Mr. Smith, write a strong letter for you. So don't just ask, but actually engage in a conversation. And then in kind of small print there, I talk about demonstrated interest. Back to your question, it is still a thing. So
Jody,
you need to demonstrate interest.
So I think the recommendations point was really well received. There are a couple questions here that I just want to ask you about that. First from Jack, and I think this is a very fair question, and then Melissa, and then, so real quick guys, Mike and Dylan, we're going to jump into the testing part of this in just a second, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in terms of IB, AP classes, all that kind of stuff. Same thing with Dylan, scholarships, I can talk a little bit about that. But to Jack and Melissa's point, Jack, this was a phenomenal question. I think it's really applicable to juniors. Struggled to get to really know teachers this year, and I think that's a very, very fair point, because if you're in COVID and you're virtual, it's hard to get to know some of these junior year teachers. Is it okay to use a freshman or sophomore year teacher? Do you feel like that's okay? And then maybe a follow-up to Jack, and maybe piggybacking off that is, Jody, do you think it's okay to explain, maybe why you're not using a junior year teacher? Because I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but junior year teachers are the ones you should approach first, because they're the ones that it's obviously probably the most rigorous year, but also the one most recent when you apply to college. And so,
yeah.
What do you think about that? What's your thoughts on that note?
Jack, great question. So Chase, you're correct. In 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But during this pandemic, and I see this firsthand because I watch my kids stare at a computer screen every single day for 6 hours. So fun. It doesn't matter now, because what I suggest or what I recommend is that you ask the teachers that know you best. So if it's a 9th grade or a 10th grade teacher, that's fine. Okay? Let me tell you, like, beggars can't be choosers. Like, these college admissions folks want to hear from people that really know the student. So it is okay for sure to have 1 or 2 teachers from years past. The one thing I would add is just make sure that there are 2 different types of teachers. So don't do 2 English teachers. Do like an English and a math, or a science and a Spanish, or something like that. So that's that. And then Melissa, your question on if you have someone in addition to a teacher. So the way it works on an application is, for the most part, colleges want 1 or 2 academic recommendations, which means the 5 core academics: English, science, social studies, math, foreign language. So PE, art, all of that doesn't count in these recommendations. Okay, so depending on the schools you're going to be applying to, it will tell you can send 1 recommendation, you can send 2 recommendations from teachers. Okay, so that's the academic ones. Your school counselor will automatically write 1 for you. And your school counselor will have meetings with you at the end of the year and teach you that whole process. Now, what you're talking about is the optional recommendation. And that depends on the school. So some colleges allow optional, like a coach, a priest, or someone that, an employer, someone that really knows you well. You can only send those if the school allows it. And so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I just piggyback on that too, guys. If they allow it, and if you have a job, I swear, and I haven't mentioned this in some of the other live streams, for every fault I probably had as a high school student with regards to schoolwork, I worked at a job from the time I was 14 to 18 because my mom otherwise wouldn't let me probably live at the house, but she kind of demanded that I have a job. And I'm convinced that the letter of recommendation that I got from my employer from 14 to 18 years old, because I was committed to it, allowed me to get into schools. So if you have a job and they allow for that, I can't stress that enough. I have another example of that. Just recently, we had a student get into a really, really prestigious school. and he didn't have. He wrote his college essay on how the fact that for the last 2 years he's bagged groceries as his job during the summer, and then they liked him so much that he kept doing it 2 days out of the week during the school year. And I think that there was some sense of like, man, this student is willing to work at every level of everything, right? And that's why he got into these schools. I'm convinced of it because of his essay, because otherwise his other statistics were relatively, even with the pack. But there had to be something that stood out, and both from my own sense and then again from this student as a great example last year. The ability to have that employer write a recommendation and then to write his own college essay on that process of how he's adapted to that is crazy. And then it's also crazy then on that note to have all of this stuff, and everybody's always so kind of sour about college admissions. To a certain degree, I think they're right, but for this student to have their employer, to have that be such a prominent aspect of their application and to get into this very prominent school, I think it speaks to everybody out there that anybody can do it. It's just about whether or not you're going to spend Tuesday and Thursday from 4 p.m. till 9 p.m. working at the local grocery store. Some students are like, I've got better things to do. This student wasn't one of those people, and he was unbelievable within his schoolwork. So again, continue to put your best foot forward. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just about working as hard as you possibly can at the things that you guys that you're continuing to do and continue to build upon that. So I just wanted to add that little caveat, but it's so important.
Okay. I'm going to finish up quickly, and then you can talk about testing. I put a slide here on the COVID essay, and that's going to remain in the next year or so on the application. Essentially, colleges don't want you to use your main college essay space to write about what you did during quarantine. So they're giving another spot on the application for you to do that. So this is a 250-word essay prompt that's optional. But again, as we learned earlier, use all aspects of the application. The word optional does not exist if you are doing everything correctly. But anyway, this I just wanted to show you does give you an opportunity to talk about how you really did use your time during quarantine. And then Amy Gordon, real quick, yes, you can choose to send your scores to some schools and not others. You just take it off of the Common App and then put it back on the Common App depending on where you're sending that application to.
Yeah, and the official scores too, Amy, are sent through ACT and SAT. So that's a separate process, guys, just to include that. You will submit a common application, and you can obviously submit your whatever score you want on the Common App, but they'll need proof that that's actually what you got, right? So you have to go into the ACT website or the College Board website and send the scores also to the schools you're looking for. And and so when you're going through that process, you can choose to send them to which schools you want to send those to.
Yeah. All right, you want to talk about testing?
Yeah, I'll jump into this. And we actually had a couple great questions. Dylan, a couple great questions about this for Dylan. First of all, on the fast food application, Dylan, absolutely. Again, and if you do a great job there, I can't stress that I worked at the same restaurant for 3 years of my high school life. I loved it. I worked there 4 or 5 days a week, even during the school year. Okay, and part of that was, again, to just get out of the house and not have to do my homework. But I loved it. And whatever drives you, if you do a great job at whatever job you have, then have an employer write that recommendation. I just cannot stress how much I think that meant to my own application and how much I think it means to that if you do that. And then, and then Dylan, on the point that you said, does a high SAT and ACT score mean more than just high SAT or ACT? You only have to take one now. 50-50, I think, is Jody. I think around 50% of students take one, and 50% of students take the other, and those are the ones that are submitted. But every college in the country now accepts both test scores. So it's my recommendation that you focus on one. There are enough differences. There's about 80% crossover between the two exams now, SAT and ACT. But it's my recommendation that you focus on one almost entirely because you can just keep it more narrowly focused. So just a kind of an opinion on that in terms of which one you're going to prepare for, Dylan. And then you had another question. And then Mike, Dylan, I'll get to that other question about scholarships, or Jody can as well. Mike, in terms of Mike, if you're still listening, and I know your question was a little bit it was like 15 minutes ago or so. Would you ask about AP classes and IB classes? Enrolled in a local community college, college credit or college classes are going to be defined by by each individual college. Like at certain Ivy League schools now, you have to get a 5 in order for it to count. So that question about how are these going to be affected or how are these going to be received in terms of what type of college, AP, IB, local community college. I would just say that it's going to really depend on the specific college that you're applying to. And I know that's vague, and I know that's not a great answer to your question, but that really comes back into play with what Jody said about really researching the colleges you're looking for and applying to, because that's going to give you a huge leg up in terms of defining your schedule, especially if you're a sophomore. If you're a freshman or sophomore right now and you have some time to define that schedule, start thinking about the colleges, or at least overview, because it's an opportunity. And I hate to say it, because if you're a freshman in high school right now, you're 14 years old, and like recess was a thing like 4 years ago, and now Jody and I are talking about what you're going to do with your life. But it is important, that you start to think about that, and just take baby steps if you can.
Yeah, Chase, let me just
jump in.
Yeah. So, Mike, for the most part, colleges look at AP and IB classes the same. If you have a full IB diploma, that goes a long way to a selective college. So, there's a difference between an IB class and an IB diploma. So, at this stage of the game, for the most part, not every school, but for the most part, AP and IB are seen in a very similar way. My kids go to an IB school, so I know that question very well.
For students that don't, IB is International Baccalaureate Program, and it's a program that's offered only by certain high schools. And typically, does RM offer AP? They offer AP classes too, right, Jody?
Yeah. So it's just a different track.
Yeah, it's a different track.
Rigorous track. So that's what it is.
Yeah. So yeah, just to give you guys some, if you don't have an IB program at your school, that's the gist of it. It's a breakdown, similar type of rigor to an AP class. Cool.
So do you want to talk about testing?
Yeah, guys.
So and everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So just couldn't agree with Jody more on pretty much every aspect of the college application that she mentioned. And for those, again, that have watched our channel, I'm a huge believer in this idea of test optional for the same reasons that Jody said. This should not be about a test score. There are certain aspects to testing, and I'll talk about that in a second. There's certain aspects to being a good test taker that will benefit you in life. So prepare, even if you don't have to. It doesn't mean that you have to spend a bunch of money preparing, right? And it seems ridiculous for somebody that does test prep as a product for the company to say that, but you don't need to. You need to be a good test taker, because I use this example all the time, and test optional gives you the ability. In most schools, for those that are, and I'll go into this in a second, but test optional means that you can apply to a school with a test score. Or you don't have to. Jody mentioned that earlier. You don't have to submit the test score, and you'll still be considered for the application for admission. But being a good test taker is important because it allows you to be focused and intense during a time when it's stressful, right? I use this for engineering majors. If you're going to be an engineer, you want to go to MIT, right? Or MIT being the Caltech, right? One of these unbelievable engineering schools. The expectation, if you get into those schools, is that you're going to be working at NASA, right, or SpaceX, and you're going to be sending us to the moon. If you don't have the intensity and the focus to send a person to the moon, that's a huge issue, right? It's like putting the heat shield on the space shuttle, right? If you're like, it can be to the right a little bit, right? That's a problem, and that's why those guys that's why these tests still matter to these different schools, and why they're not fully going. Or why they still consider them, because they need to make sure that you're able to focus for a 3-hour test like you're going to be taking in college. It's somewhat of a disservice to think that you shouldn't prepare and become a better test taker regardless of the content. You can argue the SAT and ACT content is wrong, right, to the end of time, and I wouldn't disagree with you in so many ways, but sitting there focused for 3 hours, no matter what it is something that you will have to do in college and you will have to do in life. And that's where these testing things can become so important. To Jody's point, as more of a uplifting, as more of a betterment of you, right, than something that's something that's under something that's overwhelming, I should say, something that makes you feel like, oh, I'm not a good test taker, so I'm not a good student, or I'm not a good person. That's ridiculous. But what isn't ridiculous is that feeling of stress and anxiety, and pushing through that, overcoming that, is all that work ethic and character that we're talking about. And you can really see that from being, from continuing to prepare for these tests. Melissa.
I'll take Melissa's question.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, so it's a tough question, Melissa.
Jody, let me, just for everybody let me just read it off real quick, and then you take it.
Okay.
Melissa guys asked how to decide if, right, you send to each place if you're in the 50th to 100th percentile, right? So basically the question to Jody is if you're right in the mix, right, or maybe if you're just slightly lower than what they're looking for in terms of testing, do you submit the score anyway? So Jody, I'll let you take it from there.
Okay. From what I'm seeing from the 2021 decision so far, to not submit it unless you're in the 75th or above percentile. So you ultimately have to make the decision per school, and it depends on what the school is, what the requirements are, where you fall in that, and what your other part of your application looks like. If you have a super strong transcript and GPA and resume, and you think you're going to get good, letters and all that kind of good stuff, and you're not above the 50th percentile, don't send it. If you have parts of your application that aren't so strong and you're close, maybe it will help. So I wish I could give you like the exact answer, but it's going to change at every school and each of their requirements. So
and it speaks
as
how
a whole, I would say stay. The 75th and above is when you should for sure send.
Yeah, and it speaks to the uniqueness that Jody continues to mention, is that there's a unique situation for every student, and that this is where this organization and research that Jody keeps talking about is so important, because it will allow you to make the best decision for you personally. And if we can provide the overview for that and answer some general questions about that, to Jody's point, you're kind of off and running. Okay? Great. So let's get into this, guys. Dylan, let me get to that specific question just because it's a little bit more specific to you, to somebody, I think, to an individual student. But before we do that, let me talk a little bit about the difference between these different testing options. And I unfortunately don't think colleges have done a very good job, or high schools maybe to blame, and I apologize for any high school counselors maybe watching, or high school teachers. But there is a difference between the test optional route and test blind, and those are the two biggest differences to what's happened over the last year. And I really want to make sure that everybody understands those. So in the past, 99% of colleges were what we called test required, meaning that you had to take this test. I'm a huge advocate for that. That affects negatively. I've worked with over 1,000 students over the last 7 years, over 1,000 students, and I could see it. It not only affected their mental health, but it affected relationships between students and parents, and that's not what these tests should be about. The test should really be about how you approach a difficult situation, a stressful situation, and how you overcome that. It doesn't mean that you have to make this the end-all, be-all, and that's what test requirements really have seemingly ended up becoming. But what the schools have now moved on to, and I think that there's a distinction that needs to be made, is what we call test optional. So test requirements meant that in order to be considered at all, you had to submit a test score. What's now happened is test optional, and this is what Jody's been talking about pretty significantly over the last hour or so, is that test optional means that you can submit a test score, and it will be considered as part of your application if you submit it. And it can help you. But it also means that if you do not submit a test score, and this goes back to the Stanford example from earlier, if you don't submit it, it's not going to hurt you. So again, it's one of those situations that if you're dealing in your mind like, oh man, if I don't submit it, is there really an opportunity for me to actually get into the school? Using the Stanford as an example, yeah, there is. But it has to be, you have to weigh that with your own personal resume, or application rather, right? You have to weigh that as an individual and decide, should I submit this or should I not? Because if you do submit it, it will be considered as part of the application process. So it is up to you as the student, given your background, to make that decision. I bring all this up because test optional is very different from what they call test blind. And what very, very few schools in the country have gone test blind. There have been lawsuits against the University of California school system was trying to go test blind, and there were lawsuits against the University of California system. So, in my opinion, test requirements and test blind will both never be things in the future. They'll neither make you take the test, nor will they make it test blind, because students that score well obviously want to be able to submit that score, and test optional really creates that opportunity. Test blind means that even if you submit a score, schools are going to throw the score out. They don't care. Less than 1% of schools have gone test blind. About, I think, 99% of schools went test optional in this year's class, for the class that's, again, currently on the wait list right now or deferred. And then I think, Jody, you'd probably agree that 99% are going to go test optional again for this school year. Is that fair?
Well, I wish I could say 99%.
Okay, maybe less.
But they're just every day announcing.
Okay. So we're still up in the air. And unfortunately, last year, as Jody and I both recalled, that some of the schools didn't become test optional until like the very end of the summer. So they were kind of holding out as long as they could to keep it as a testing requirement. We'll see if they go back to that again. Like I said, I don't think that testing required and test blind will be a significant thing in the future. I think this testing optional is a happy medium. But I just wanted you guys to know the difference between test optional and test blind, because I think a lot of times students and parents that ask me questions about this think that test optional means that they're not going to consider that at all. So I shouldn't take the test. That's not the case. Again, if you have a score that's above the 75th percentile for a given school, it's my belief that it actually helps you more than it has in previous years, because when the test was a requirement, they used it as a kind of a sorting method, right? That's more than anything what it was used for. Or scholarship opportunities, to answer your question, Dylan, from earlier. A lot of times that merit-based scholarships were largely based on test scores, like National Merit Scholarship, right, is based on your PSAT score, and then they go into other aspects of the application. But other than that, I really think this test optional means that if you do well and you submit your score, it can be considered a plus rather than just kind of the sorting mechanism that it has been in the past. So it's a good reason to prepare. It's a good reason to be thinking about this. There's other aspects to being a good test taker that will help you in life. Learning how to push through that wall when you're just like, right? I mean, who wants to wake up at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning to take an ACT test? I do this for a living. There's no chance that, Jody saw me right before this call. We started this live stream, and I'm scrambling to get everything ready to go to be ready today. So it's not like even as somebody that does this for a living that I think about this all the time. And when you're 16 years old, that's even more true for the vast majority of students, 99% of students. So there is some skill, there is some value, significant value in being able to do something that you don't want to do. Because if you are able to do that for the ACT and the SAT, and you come back around and you think to yourself, man, I just worked as hard as I could for something that I absolutely despised doing. I didn't want to wake up at 7 a.m. to get ready for this 8 a.m. test. Well, then, geez, when you get to something that you love to do, think about where your work ethic is going to be for something like that. So again, the test optional route does not mean that you can't submit a test score. It simply means that you have the ability to choose. And again, I am a huge believer in this. And I'm actually an even bigger believer in what I'll talk about here in a second. There's a third route that schools are starting to take just to be considered, right? Especially for sophomores and freshmen, because I think that this third option is going to be adopted by a lot of schools going forward. It's currently adopted by NYU, but you guys can see this test flexible admissions. NYU is the first to do it. Test flexible means that you can submit a test score. So look out for this, right? This is where the research comes in that Jody was talking about. Look out to see if your school to see if your preferred college is test flexible. NYU, like I said, is one of the big, is probably the most prominent school that's done this in recent years. And what test flexible means, and I think it's actually the best option, means that you can submit different types of scores. So you can submit the SAT, you can submit the ACT, but if you don't want to submit those two scores, you can submit 3 AP scores. And I think that this is going to be really, really important for students that are very specific. Like if you're a creative writing major, then why in the world, right, would you really need to know a ton about math? And on vice versa, if you're an engineering major, why in the world would you need to submit a significant writing score? And people will argue all the time that, well, yeah, you need to be a good writer as an engineer, but it's not you don't need to be a better writer as an engineer than you need to be at math. And that's where this test flexible option comes in, where you can start to submit different types of scores rather than having to be locked into preparing for the ACT or the SAT or whatever it may be. So I wanted to give you guys an overview because these are the 4 different testing options. Test requirements, again, as Jody said, I guess we'll be waiting to see if testing required picks up again. I didn't think it would, but maybe I'm certainly not in the know in that sense. But
let me just throw a little bit in
here.
First of all, there's some pretty bold statements there, Chase.
In terms of what?
About the future of testing.
Yeah.
And test blind and all that. So I don't know if I'd be a betting woman there, but I always tell my students, you got to take the test. You got to at least try if you can, if they're offered, because you never know what schools are going to be asking for them or not. So do your homework, try your best. Don't let it take over your world. Again, character is just as important, if not more. And put it in its own place. So that's kind of where I think I would like to leave the whole, the understanding of how to think of the testing process.
Yeah, and guys, listen to Jody on that one too, because I'm just freewheeling it out here. I still believe very much in the testing, but part of the reason we haven't done a live stream on college admissions is because I'll probably say something that will get you guys declined from a school. But in all honesty,
Chase is an amazing testing expert. Literally, I've put my children
through the program. That's a good testimonial, right, guys? That Jody's not only here for Jody's not only here for that, but has had her own students go through this. You guys, there's a lot of opportunities. We put a lot of content on this channel to help you guys to make sure that you guys are pushing your own personal envelope as far as you possibly can to put the best foot forward as you possibly can. I get it. 15 years ago, there was a huge discrepancy in what content and resources were available to students, particularly hiring a college counselor or doing these test prep programs. That's not the case anymore. If you don't believe me, just look at Khan Academy. And again, I bring all this stuff up because there is significant value in being a good test taker. Not what your score ends up being, but really how far are you willing to push doing something that you don't want to do? How far are you willing to push that wall? Because there's going to be a moment when you're 3.5 hours into a long test, right, where you're just like, whatever, just get me out of here. I'll go to Chipotle with my friends. I really don't care about this anymore. And it's at that moment that your focus needs to be there. And that kind of goes back to that space shuttle with the heat shield example that I was talking about. You have to be really, really careful about where you're going to place something if you want this, this big career or big opportunity in life. So I just want to bring that up. And again, I think that testing, part of the reason that our testing programs or these YouTube channel, these live streams go well from a testing standpoint is solely because I really believe in these tests. Okay, I truly, truly believe in these tests and what they can provide, and it doesn't mean that you have to put all your effort into it. I certainly didn't when I was your age. I wish I would have put more effort into it, just into school and into life really. But it does mean that you should continue to push the envelope, because being a good test taker means that you're willing to sit there and be focused on something that might not be the most important thing, and that's life, guys. I hate to bring it up, but 7 years ago, like I said, you guys were talking about recess, and now all of a sudden Jody and I are talking about what life is going to throw at you, and that's going to come really quickly. If you're 17 years old right now, you can join the military next year, right? It comes at you very, very quickly. You have to make sure that you're doing these things, you're listening to your parents. If you don't listen to your parents, then listen to me on these live streams, listen to Jody on these live streams, because I get it. There was certainly not... We didn't lack screaming matches in my household when I was, 16, 17, 18 years old. But it means that you put your best foot forward. I had a friend that served in the military. He went to Afghanistan when he was 18 years old. That's a year from now. That's an unbelievable sacrifice. So I'm not saying that all of you guys have to do that. But the point is being made that you're going to have to sacrifice in life, whether it be this extreme end, right, or it be something lighter. There are going to be moments where you have to push through that, and that's where these tests can be really, really important. So think about that. To answer your question about Dylan, 3 AP scores, different subjects, it depends on the major. Again, that's a unique question, but I love it. Guys, Dylan just asked a question, is the 3 AP scores, going back to the test flexible idea, 3 AP scores that have to be science or have to be math. If you're an engineering major, generally speaking, it's 3 AP scores that can all be related to like physics and the 2 AP calc classes, right, or 2 sciences and a math. So it kind of depends on the major. But you can submit those if your major calls for that, and that's where that Jody's talk about research is so important. You have to make sure that you as an individual you apply that.
Dylan, I would, if you do go that direction, I would try to do 2 science and a math or 2 science and something else. I would try not to do all 3 the same. I mean, you can do it, but I think it's good to, balance is very important. So I think that would be my recommendation.
Jody, you said 2 sciences and a math, or 2 maths and a science. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Dylan's looking to study, but I'm assuming it's something in the science study world. I would do 2 sciences and something else. English is fine too. It's or history or whatever, just to show a different aspect of what you know or who you can be.
Yep. Yeah. So hopefully Dylan.
Are there any other specific questions or like anything we hit that I'd be happy to answer any other questions?
Yeah, guys, and on that note, on top of that, so please ask your questions. Can everybody give 2 thumbs up if this all makes sense? Not if you think that the presentation was great, but if this makes sense, right? 2 thumbs up to make sure that you guys are tracking this, you're following along, and you know what you need to do coming out of this presentation in order to put your best foot forward next year or in 2 years or 3 years, whatever that timeline looks like. 2 thumbs up if that makes sense. And then to what Jody's comment just was, if you guys have any questions for us, please make sure that you post them in the chat, and we're happy to answer those as much as we can.
Yeah.
Great, guys.
Literally, I almost asked you how to do a thumbs up.
Well, yeah, that's.
I just figured it out.
The technology play. Guys, one other thing too, just as you guys, if you guys are gearing up your questions, we see a lot of thumbs up coming into the chat now. If you haven't been with us before for one of these live streams or on our channel before, make sure that well, first of all, please make sure you subscribe. That's just a little ad for us here. But most importantly, make sure that you comment below any of these videos. Once this is posted as the permanent, right, as the recorded version of this, it will be available for free for everybody. So make sure that you guys comment below the video if you come up with questions here in the next, 2 months and you don't, or 6 months before you have to apply. And Jody and I, or I, or whatever, somebody will answer those questions in the comment section. We're pretty diligent and good about that. So please just make sure that you guys know that you can comment. Jody, new question: college touring demonstrated interest. Jack asked if virtual touring. You can see that I'm thinking about tutoring too much. Virtual touring is okay.
It's totally okay. And they're actually pretty good. Like a lot of the schools revamped their whole virtual tours and info sessions, so they're really. I highly recommend them. And yes, that counts as demonstrating interest.
Great.
And actually, if you have one thing, here's a little nugget of advice that I try to instill in my students. If you have a subject of interest or something that you want to study or potentially major in, if you reach out to the school and set up either an info session or a meeting with an academic advisor in that particular subject, that goes an even longer way. So essentially, let's say you were interested in communications and you met with an advisor in the communications department. You hear not only firsthand information about what you're actually going to be doing at the school, but you are making a connection. And so when you send that person a thank you note, you can CC admissions and say, so that they know you've had that form of communication.
It's a great,
Yeah.
great idea, great advice. So Jack, does that make sense? Can you give us a thumbs up if what Jody just said made sense? It's a great piece of advice with regards to that email. Something that's, I think, very unique and part of the reason why we want to do this presentation, because she's got some great insights on that. Jody, another question for you. And let's, if you can, I know there's probably a million things off the top of your head that you could recommend to Mike here. Mike asks, guys, if I'm a junior, what's the number one thing I should do right now? And again, there's probably a million different things you can choose from, but juniors, number one thing.
Okay, that is an impossible question to answer. But always, do your best in school. Okay, I can't say one thing. I have to say a couple things.
Okay,
do
Mike,
your best in school.
You get a little bonus info here, Mike.
Yeah.
A couple of things.
If you haven't yet, take something that you're interested in and do it at a higher level. So let's say you are volunteering for a local nonprofit, and that nonprofit, you're just helping them, weekly. Let's say that nonprofit has a project or something that they need help with. Raise your hand, volunteer to do that. So that shows leadership, it shows drive, it shows community, it shows a lot. So if you're a junior, you have plenty of time to dive in and actually do a little bit more. And then lastly, the explanation I just gave you on researching schools and actually diving in deeper and meeting with academics, understanding majors, understanding what you're actually going to be doing at the school is super duper important, because a lot of schools on their application have you write an essay that says, why school? Why Wisconsin? Why Indiana? Why wherever, Michigan? I just did like 3 Big Ten schools, totally by accident, by the way. But anyway, you have to know why. So the more research you do, the more conversations you have, the better, stronger your application is going to be.
And Jody, just asking you another question to piggyback off Mike's here. The demonstrated commitment, right? Isn't that a big part? Because to your point, and I thought it was exactly right with the service example and taking the next step. That kind of knocks out 2 things, right? Because isn't there something that colleges like to see with commitment of activities? Not just doing it and putting it down, but having some sense to that.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean by depth versus breadth. So essentially, yes, take what don't be all over every place. Be linear. Be strong in a couple places. So that is commitment. That is depth. And it doesn't have to be formal. Whenever I talk about leadership with students, they're thinking, oh, I have to be president of this class or captain of this team. That's not leadership. Leadership is stepping up to the table and saying, I'll help. Or these kids are needing to have more workouts on my soccer team, so I'm going to volunteer to do that. That's leadership. That's taking a step outside of your comfort zone and being a manager of some sort. Okay, so again, it doesn't have to be formal. It just has to be. So look for those ways.
Look for those opportunities. Yeah, that's, guys, depth instead of breadth. Breadth. Spelled with a DTH at the end. Breadth, depth, BREADTH. It's a tutoring. Yeah, guys, so that's a great point. Depth. Mike, does that make sense? Can you give me a thumbs up if that makes sense? Thumbs up in the chat. Mike, depth instead of breadth, where you can really expand upon things that you're already doing. You play a sport, maybe go coach a sport, or coach the same sport, but it shows that commitment that these colleges are looking to, right? That commitment to focus. Stay on it. Yep, great question. So guys, I think that in terms of the questions that are currently in the chat, that was the last one. Anybody else have any other questions? Jody and I are happy to answer those. If it's something a little bit more unique, guys, so if it's specific to you, Mike, that's a good question, and Jody, let's answer that in just a second. That's a great, and Jody, I'll have to. Are you familiar with what Twitch is?
I have no.
Okay, I'll explain that. I'll explain that just.
Is it legal? If it's not
No.
legal,
Twitch is where gamers. So the same software we're using to stream this right now is what gamers use to. Remember I was telling you about that. Twitch is the platform that most gamers use to stream their video games. Mike, if you're a great gamer, if you have some like credentials for that, then that's a great thing to put on an application. I know that from experience with other students doing that. We had a student last year that was really into drones and drone racing, and was like, whatever, ranked in that. Ranked, if you've seen it on ESPN, it's pretty sweet. But if you're a gamer and you do stuff on Twitch, then definitely try to submit that. It's pretty cool. And guys, real quick, just one other thing too. If you guys have further questions for Jodi or me, I just want to mention this. We're happy to continue to answer these within the chat. But if you have questions, I've posted the info emails for both Star Tutors and College Unlimited in the description below, along with the viewable presentation that you guys are seeing on the screen right now. Feel free to click those links and send us an email if it's something specific. And like I said, if you want to make it even easier on yourself, because I know students don't love to, from my experience working with 16 and 17-year-olds, email is not the best way to communicate. If you guys just want to post a comment on the channel, we'll get back to you, and you'll get a notification when that comes about, right? When we've responded to your question, you'll get a notification, so you'll know just like you would on like an email. Mike, by the way, did that answer your question on the Twitch YouTube stuff? I think it would look great. It all comes back, Mike. That's a very unique and modern thing that hasn't. Twitch wasn't available 5 years ago, and it's such a modern thing that it might not be the first thought for most people to put that on their college application. But if you're really good at something related to YouTube or Twitch, or you've developed a following, that again shows initiative that just is a different form of initiative than something somebody would put on there. Certainly when I was 10 years ago when I was doing this stuff for getting into college and whatnot. And then Dylan has one question. One more thing. I have an SAT this Saturday. I've been studying the past couple of months. What else should I do these last couple of days? Guys, a great question. First of all, Dylan, for anybody that's wondering, we have let me post this, guys. We have a YouTube live stream for tomorrow, Dylan, for our comprehensive review. Let me grab that for you guys. If you're taking the SAT on Saturday, again, we have a comprehensive review tomorrow night from the same time, from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific. If you're taking the test, I highly, highly encourage you guys to join that. We'll be doing just a kind of an overview of all 4 sections of the SAT, answering questions related to the sections, giving you guys just hopefully a feeling of comfort going into Saturday. But I would highly recommend that you guys attend that. Beyond that, Dylan, remember, if you've done a lot of preparation, I don't know if you have, but if you've done a lot of preparation over the course of the last 2 or 3 months, it's going to be there. I wouldn't do too much. The comprehensive review tomorrow night is really just going to be talking about a general overview of each section of the test and answering any specific questions you might have. But don't do too much. Trust that it's going to be there. Trying to memorize a 30, 60, 90 right triangle on the last day before the test is only going to make you more kind of agitated or stressed, anxious. That's going to be one question out of 58 questions on the math section. So don't focus on one specific question type or technique. Instead, be really focused on, are you applying the strategies? Are you doing the things that you want to do to stay relaxed? Because ultimately, that's what makes a great test taker, is being able to stay relaxed in this type of environment, in a real testing environment. That was the only reason that I was a good test taker as a kid, was because I didn't think about the next day. I was like, I guess I was that person. Like, I guess I'll do this today, right? Waking up and just kind of do it to do it. And amazingly, that's like the discernible skill I had as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old. But it pays off, because when you're in the testing environment, you just kind of keep going with that. You're just like, well, I guess I'll move on to the next question now, right? There's not a ton of. It's a very narrow-minded way of thinking. I certainly do not recommend that for pretty much any other aspect of your life, Dylan, but certainly on the test-taking front, I do. So let me post this. Sorry, this computer's running slow because we got a million different streams going here. But let me post this real quick for you, Dylan. And again, I encourage you to participate tomorrow. Jodi, while I'm doing this, I can't see the chat. Can you see anybody else pulling up?
No, I'm good. Oh wait.
Dylan was
there you go.
Okay. Dylan was last.
Yeah, we're done with questions, I think, unless anyone else has anything.
All right, cool. So I will, we'll pull this up. Give 1 second, sorry. Guys, yeah, so again, I want to say a big thank you to Jody for joining us tonight. I certainly wouldn't have been able to talk this much about college admissions, which is why we haven't had this type of presentation on the channel over the course of the last 2 years or so. But I'm super glad that she joined us tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation and were able to, continue to push forward. And yeah, Melissa, thank you. Thanks for the nice comment. Yeah, hopefully that continues. Hopefully Star Tutors continues to grow. I can't thank you guys enough for continuing to support our channel. It really means a lot to us, and more than anything, it probably makes us want to do more things like this. Certainly, if you guys weren't as participative and as positive as you are on this channel, especially given the kind of the bleak, what's thought of as probably a negative overview of this environment, Jody and I are trying to change that. We don't want you to think that way. This is a great process. Being 18 years old is awesome. I wish I could go back to college for a lot of reasons, none of which have to do with school work. But there's a lot of great things. You can meet a lot of great people. And so that it doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all. Be a 16, 17-year-old. Be that person. And then work harder than I did. But you can do those things pretty easily. Right? There's an even balance. Be this person, right? That's fun and has friends and is nice to people and is kind to people. And then also work. Don't leave that part out, because otherwise you're being an idiot like I was, and that is not, you're going to be playing catch up when you realize it at 22 and you finally matured as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old man-child. So that's some words of advice there, guys. So keep it up. Keep staying positive. We love the comments. And then, yeah, tell your friends. We'd love to have more subscribers on the channel. And continue to comment on these videos. We're happy to answer those. And then finally, I said that I was going to get this to you, Dylan. Dylan, here's the link to the live stream for the comprehensive SAT review. Awesome, guys. So it looks like everybody's good to go. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Jody, I'm gonna switch back to the other camera version here for just a second. So guys, please thank Jody for being here with us tonight. Again, I can't stress how I would not have been able to do this certainly anywhere close to this type of depth without her. So thank her. And if you guys have any questions for Jody or me, please make sure that you post those below this video as soon as it becomes a recording here in the next 2 minutes. You guys can post any comments you have, and we'll be happy to answer those comments. So here's the video for Dylan. And otherwise, guys, switching back here for just a second. Otherwise, guys, have a great rest of your day. I hope you guys hope a great rest of your night, or maybe day, wherever you are in the world. Wherever you're watching this, I hope you have a great rest of your day, great rest of your night. If you're taking the SAT tomorrow, hopefully we see you guys for the comprehensive SAT review tomorrow night at the same time. Yeah, you guys are going to absolutely crush it on Saturday if you guys are getting ready to take that test, that SAT test. So keep it up, guys. Keep working hard. Keep doing the things that you need to do. Keep being, do the right thing when you can. Make sure, or all the time, do the right thing all the time. But if you make a mistake, right? If you're not doing the things that you needed to do in high school at this point, don't do what I did and just be like, oh, I guess it's over, right? Continue to push forward. Find the things that you can do between now and the time you have to apply, especially if you're a junior, that make the difference maybe on that college application, that make the difference in a scholarship, right? That open more doors, that give you more opportunities. That's going to make the biggest difference in your lives, I promise. And I know, again, that that's a big statement to be making, given that you were 10 years old 7 years ago, right? That seems ridiculous to say all these things. But it's true. Life comes at you fast. You're going to be 18 here in just a second, where you're going to be a legal adult. Decisions will have to be made for yourself. And again, have that maturity to continue to push forward and work as hard as you can. All right. Otherwise, guys, I want to thank Jody. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, for being so participative and positive during the presentation. And guys, we'll see you next time for the live stream, hopefully tomorrow night. And we'll see you guys on the comprehensive review. Guys, let us know if you have any questions, and have a great rest of your night. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your week, and good luck on the SAT if you guys are taking that on Saturday. Thanks, guys.